Oak Bay, Gordon Head.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, the 2017 BC election platform states this, and I quote, "We will ensure that the salmon farming industry does not endanger wild salmon by implementing the recommendations of the Cohen Commission, keeping farm sites out of the important salmon migration routes, and supporting research and transparent monitoring to minimize the risk of disease transfer from captive to wild fish." Honourable Speaker, in addition, the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure promised First Nation leaders in Alert Bay on April the 23rd of 2017, and I quote, "We will remove fish farms, comma. We are committed to that, and we can actually form government to make this happen and make sure that these territories and the North Island are clear of fish farms." And she did so, with respect, Honourable Speaker, in a means of ways of convincing First Nation leaders not to vote for the BC Green Party. My question through you to the Minister of Agriculture is this. What is the government's plan now to implement the recommendations of the Cohen Commission and assist in the transition from ocean-based fish farms to land-based closed containment systems?
Minister. If it was always that friendly. Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member from Oak Bay, Gordon Head, for the question. I appreciate it, and I want to assure the member and the people of British Columbia that our government is deeply committed to protecting BC's wild salmon. It's essential to our economy, it's essential to our province, and it's essential to our BC's First Nations. The Cohen Commission recommendations are something that we did commit to in our platform, and we are absolutely committed to fulfilling those recommendations. There is federal recommendations, and there's BC's portion of those recommendations, and we are committing to do that. I wanted to also, I'm sure the member probably knows that, but I did want to point out that in 2010 there was a Hinson decision which moved the responsibility for fish health and licensing of fish farms to the federal government. The provincial government has the responsibility for tenures, and it's important to know that at this time, as we're figuring out where we go next, that there is no tenures being approved and no renewal of tenures being approved.
Member Oak Bay, Gordon Head on a supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. First off, I do wish to thank the official opposition for their support in the question. I'm sure they thought I was going to offer a softball, but this is actually a very serious question on, that we would like to actually get details on. I'd like to acknowledge that this is a very complex, multi-jurisdictional issue, Honourable Speaker, but let me be very clear. The Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure was forthright and clear that her government was going to remove fish farms from the migratory tracts of sockeye salmon, period. And she said that to First Nation leaders in the North Island and convinced them not to vote for the BC Green Party because of that. Because of that. Now, my question again to the Minister of Agriculture is this. My question is this. Does she intend, in her mandate, to end the use of open net fish farms along the migratory passage of sockeye salmon as promised to British Columbians by the now Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure?
Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Members, the friendliness is wonderful, but we shall hear the minister's response.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you again for your question. So I'm not sure if the member knows, but I am waiting for the recommendations coming from a report from the Minister of Agriculture's Advisory Council on Finfish Aquaculture that has been looking at this issue. I expect that report to be coming forward with recommendations at the end of this year. But while I wait for those recommendations, I have already been on the ground meeting with stakeholders. I've met with First Nations, the industry. I've also sat down with the Minister of Fisheries, Minister LeBlanc from the federal government, and invited him to come sit at the table with us, because I think it's going to take the provincial government, the federal government, First Nations, and industry to sit together as we move forward and figure out the recommendations and how to implement them. Thank you.